Very recently I had the good fortune of trading to acquire this pristine Ariocarpus kotschoubeyanus. It's clearly been very well loved. It's pampered in immaculate condition, but not for much longer, because I'm going to be introducing it to a hard-grown lifestyle. That's right, I'm going to be staging it up habitat style today, introducing it to a very Spartan watering cycle, because my goal is to get this plant to mimic how they look out in the wild. So join me now as we go through a little bit of a journey through the wonderful world of Ariocarpus and how we can make them look like plants out in habitat. Now, Ariocarpus are one of the more unique genera of cacti in existence. That's because unlike most cacti that store their water above the soil line in their stem, Ariocarpus have developed a thick, fattened geophytic underground root, and that's where they keep their water. Typically, the only thing that emerges above the soil line are these leaf-like protuberances called tubercles. Unsurprisingly, when a plant only barely emerges above the soil line, it's usually pretty well camouflaged. It's a way of adapting and surviving out in the wild. But in cultivation, Ariocarpus aren't necessarily grown like that. Most Ariocarpus growers, for a matter of taste, prefer to show them off far more prominently. And in fact, you'll find that there have been many cultivars that have been bred in places like Japan that really show off quite distinctive forms. Plants like your Ariocarpus fissuratus Godzilla and Super Godzilla, where the tubercles have almost taken on a reptilian appearance, or alternatively something like Ariocarpus retusus cauliflower, where those tubercles are almost wart-like. They essentially have a cauliflower-like texture. Quite fascinating, quite bizarre, and very appealing to the sorts of people who like strange and unusual plants. For me, I do find those looks quite appealing, but today I'm not going to lean into them. Today I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to try and make this thing look like it lives in habitat. I'm going to aim for that cryptic look. I was thinking about this the other day. Why? Why do I want to plant my plants like they're in habitat? Well, I suspect it's so that I can live vicariously through them. I've never seen cacti in the wild, out in habitat. Down here in Australia, you can't see them. There's a few that grow by the side of the road as pests, but you know, nothing more than that. And so, by planting them up habitat style, I reckon I can almost taste what the real thing is like. So the goal today is to introduce this plant to the hard-grown lifestyle. I'm taking a bit of inspiration from this plant here. This is a Lophophora williamsii peyote cactus, which I've already started the process with. You can see it's been top dressed with this very heavy, dense calcareous clay top dressing, which over time has baked a bit in the sun and cracked up, giving it, I think, a bit of a habitat style character. But what you'll find with both of these plants is they're very thick tuberous roots. When exposed to prolonged drought, will actually pull the plants, retract them into the soil line. And that, I suppose, is the feature that I'm most trying to achieve in planting these up. Because then when they get water and they plump up again, it'll crack around this top dressing a little bit more and introduce ever more of that habitat style character. So that's the goal for this guy today. Let's get into it and see if we can achieve it, hey? First things first, we're going to be using 100% mineral soil. Need something really well draining because that clay top dressing really retains moisture. Anything that gets in there doesn't evaporate very easily. So, got here a mix of various minerals, but mostly pumice. I'm just going to fill that up. Leaving a little bit of space at the top for my clay top dressing. Now, the fascinating thing about how these plants appear in habitat is that they often grow in surprising places like creek beds and mud flats. I've read reports online of people who visited them in habitat and said that they've found them submerged underwater for days on end. And so it's that muddy creek bed look that I'm going to be going for today. So this clay top dressing is made from a variety of dry, very fine clay materials. So to protect my lungs, I'm going to be putting this bad boy on and then mixing up some of these different ingredients you can see right in front of you. Whoa. This top dressing is something that I've been working on for quite some time. I've gone through about 10 iterations trying to find the right mix with the right colour, the right final crackling appearance. I'm not going to bore you with the recipe itself, but the sorts of things that are going into it, I've got a bit of calcium carbonate, bentonite clay, which is the thing that retracts. It sort of shrinks as it dries, and that's what creates those cracks. Then a mixture of different powdered rocks essentially. I've got decomposed granite, a bit of palagonite, diatomaceous earth, the list goes on. And then when it all ends up together, you add a little bit of colouring in the form of these oxides, just a tiny amount, and you get that kind of natural look. And when it's all done, the end result is, I think, quite effective. But like I said, didn't come easy. There was a lot of experimentation to get to this point. And now with the ingredients all added, we're just going to give it a real good mix. I guess like mixing the dry ingredients of a cake, right? Just need to make sure it's all in there. Especially want to make sure that the coloured oxides are mixed in really well, because I don't want to have streaks of very dark colour running throughout what should end up being quite a pale mix. Don't know if you can see all the dust coming off this, but it speaks to why this mask is so crucial. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now the next step here is to introduce a bit of water. We don't want it to be too runny, but we also don't want it to be too dry. So doing this fairly carefully. And the next step is going to require getting our hands a little bit dirty. Just get in there and start mixing it all around. In this case, I'm not too worried if my mix is too wet, because like I said, I'm trying to approximate the look of a creek bed. And as you can imagine, that sort of clay is going to get very, very wet indeed. Now, roll a bit more of the dry stuff in there. I'm just going to give it a bit of a mix as well while it's like this. The hard bit is going to be applying this absolute mucky mess around my plant without completely covering it up, but it's a problem for just a moment. Alright, a bit more dry stuff around it. What a beautiful disaster this is. Now at the moment, the colouring of this is a fairly light brown, but as it dries out, I've found that it will actually kind of fade. It'll go a bit more pale. It'll be a bit more, or quite significantly more white than this, which is kind of the habitat look that I want to go for, because these plants in habitat grow in a type of soil called calichet, which is a limestone based sort of soil, very heavy in that calcium carbonate, which, if you're paying attention, I did add to this clay mix, and as a result it's a fairly white sort of top dressing. So what we're going to do now, bring back the Ariocarpus, and now it becomes a matter of applying this muck all around it. So we're going to do this as carefully as possible, but I have no doubt that some of this is going to end up on the plant itself, so the next step after this will be giving it a little tidy up. Might add a little bit more water to my mix. There we go, that's better. Look at that, disgusting. Now importantly, I want it to get in under those tubercles. It's very sticky, so it's not the easiest thing to do. God, I hope this is recording. Right, I'm going to go wash my hands off. Can you see why? Because I'm going to go get precision instruments to help me be a little bit more precise with where I'm headed now. Okay, precision instrument number 1, toothbrush, just for tidying things up. Precision instrument number 2, screwdriver for fine applications. As you can see, getting in there, making sure the clay is pressed up underneath those tubercles. Doesn't matter if some of the tubercles are buried a little bit, because that's reflective of how these plants do grow in habitat. You might have seen my earlier habitat staging video. That was the one where I basically said I'm doing this for the first time. I've done quite a few plants in this sort of style now, a lot of practice, and the thing I love about it, apart from, like I said, living vicariously through these plants, is the fact that it really scratches a creative itch. I mean, I love growing plants for the, I guess, the mental well-being aspects. And I love growing plants because they're an opportunity to explore and learn new things. I'm really into the science of them, but there's also a creative outlet in staging plants, and that's another aspect that I really find quite worthwhile and wonderful. So now I'm just going to smooth out this soil. I'm going to try and lower the clay line a little bit. It's a bit heaped up there. Now this might just look like I'm making a mess, but I'm getting in there and making sure that clay is all pressed up against the plant. Might actually just put a bit of water on it as well, just to make it a bit more conducive to... Might have been a little bit too much, but that's okay. Okay, now we're just going to get the worst of that muck off. And try and smooth out the rest of this. Now, in staging this, you could add more rocks, you could add some sort of feature pebbles and stuff around the plant. In this case, I'm not going to do that. What I will do later on is I'll add a bit of dirt and detritus, you know, a very slight hint of organic matter, just to fill in the cracks, but that's not going to happen until after this is dried. So what happens now? This is going to go into a dry, sunny place, and it'll probably take 2 or 3 days for this clay here to really dry out. And when it does, the bentonite component of this clay will contract, and that, at least, is what I'm hoping, if all goes to plan, that contraction is going to be what forms the cracks around this plant and gives it that habitat-like character. So that's what I'm going to do now. This is going into my dry winter greenhouse up on the top shelf to get plenty of sun. We are scheduled for a bit of sun later this afternoon, so that's going to get the process started. Dry it out, add a bit of detritus, and then give it a tidy up, and then this plant should be finished and ready to display. It's been about 5 days now since I staged this up, and it's been baking in the sun in my greenhouse. And as a result, the clay's dried out, and the bentonite in that clay has contracted, and you can see it's starting to get those signature cracks that in my opinion, make this such an appealing habitat look. What's going to happen from here? Well, it's going to get a very sparse watering regime. Over the winter, no water whatsoever. And the hope is that this plant will start to dehydrate and contract as a result. And what will hopefully take place is that contraction will result in even more cracking around the edge of this plant. When springtime comes, I will water it, and then it'll plump up, and this watering cycle will continue to erode and degrade this clay top dressing, make it look ever more naturalistic. So although it's only early days, and I still think this looks pretty good as a start, this is the beginning of a living art piece, so to speak, which hopefully is only going to improve as time passes. Now, it's really well worth noting that we're going to have to be very careful when watering this plant. The dense layer of clay in the top dressing there is going to stop most evaporation. So there's two things I've done. The first is that all mineral soil, which you saw at the start of the video. But I'm also using this very fancy, perhaps over-engineered pot designed specifically for habitat staging, which, as you can see, has got drainage all around it and a big drainage reservoir underneath as well. And that's going to help this plant to dry out more rapidly than if it was just sitting in ordinary plastic. So what's left to do? Well, really now it's just a matter of tidying up the caked clay that's around the top of the pot, making it a little bit more presentable and letting it sit and settle into this space. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's a bit of an art project, a bit of a creative outlet, and like I said, it's a way for me almost to experience these plants in habitat. Not really, but it's about as close as I'm going to get without forking out thousands of dollars to take a trip to the other side of the world. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, hit like. If you're not subscribed, now's your chance. Hit the subscribe button, and of course there are ways that you can support Arid financially as well if you're interested. T-shirts are available, some pretty cool merch, and there's a Patreon as well for those of you that are truly dedicated Arid fans. There's a link on your screen. You can check all of those things out through that link. Whatever you do, even if you just watch the videos, thank you so much. I love your support. Until next time, happy growing, and you might want to have a bit of a play around with doing something just like this yourself.